Good morning, everybody. Now it's 10 o'clock. Are you ready to join this workshop, second day workshop? We have Professor Zebene. Good morning, Professor Zebene. And see the Koikas Mr. Sin. Okay, now it's 4 o'clock. We will start as scheduled. I'm in charge of the module 5 and 6, this morning session. So my name is Donggyun Park. So I will be moderator for this morning session. And today we have two speakers this morning. Dr. Yowhan from Korea University. He's delivering experiences of Korea on forest management from tradition to modern practices. He is a well-known researcher, especially in forest ecology, soil management, and you name it. So this is a good chance. So if you have any questions about forest management in Korea and other forest ecology issues, you can ask him directly. And then the module 6 will be myself, and I will talk about integration of SFM into RDD plot to address climate change. And now I will invite our first speaker, Professor Son. Now it's your, please.
Thank you,
go ahead. Yeah.
Dr. Park. I am Yowhan Son. It is my great honor to speak today. Everybody can hear me? No? Okay. As Dr. Park mentioned, my topic is experiences of Korea on forest management from tradition to modern practices. Basically, I would like to share Korean experiences on forest management, basically from old tradition to modern practices, including national reforestation program. This is the content of my talk. First, briefly some background information. And second is the tradition on Korean forest, including kind of East Asian philosophy called Feng Shui and specific type of village forest, Maulsu. And then brief introduction on historical governance of forest resources in Korea. And then community forestry, we called it Sallimgye. And then reforestation program, like to introduce the specific reforestation program during 1960s and 70s. And then impacts of reforestation program after the successful reforestation. We have seen a lot of change in forest and related area. And finally, conclusions. During my talk, if you have any questions, please go ahead and maybe you can send a message or you can directly ask question. I'm not sure how it works, but basically we can take a question during my presentation. First, background. I'm pretty sure that you have your own traditional knowledge and experience related to forestry area. In general, traditional knowledge is indigenous to humanity and acquired over a long period of human interaction with the environments throughout the world. However, traditional knowledge systems have faded since the global modernization of human societies. I guess it will be the same condition in Ethiopia as same in South Korea. But some recently rediscovered traditions have proven themselves to be key components of sustainable development. You may find very important key components for sustainable forest management in your society also. South Korean traditions are closely related to forest and the rich experiences of implementing modern forestry systems. You might have heard that this history that traditionally East Asian countries have highly relied on rice production. Still, it's the same. In East Asian countries, including Korea, Japan, China, even some Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam or Thai, rice production is very important. You know, for rice production, water resources are the key component for successful crop harvest. Proper management of water resources and nutrients are essential in the region. So we need a lot of water for rice cultivation. Also, quite a lot of nutrients are needed for rice production. In addition, this rice production is labor intensive. A lot of hands are needed for paddy field rice production. Then the villages and rice paddy have harmonized with the forest. Field and garden, streams and other surroundings. You see, in a landscape, you have different types of ecosystems like a forest, streams, field, even residential area, something like that. Then the theory of divination based on topography, we call feng shui, is very common kind of philosophy or knowledge in East Asian countries. On your bottom right-hand side, we see a very typical landscape in South Korea. You see forest land and rice paddy field, village and water resources. Those are well positioned depending on topographic conditions. For example, when we have a forest at the back, close to the residential area, we have cultivated fields or garden, and then residential area villages. And in front of the villages, traditionally we have a paddy field like this. So this kind of arrangement is very typical and traditional. So water, nutrient, and other resources are circulated through forest rice paddy and stream in the mountainous landscape. And forests were especially important as sources of water and nutrient for rice paddy. In addition, forests also provided fuels and wood for agricultural tools and construction, buildings, so on. It might be similar in many countries in East Asian countries. So from forest, we get fuels and wood residues, and also forest provide nutrient and rain water to rice paddy field. And then after the rice paddy field, water and nutrient move to streams. Sometimes we irrigate the paddy field using water from the stream, so on. So these are well connected and well organized system. Now, second topic about the tradition on Korean forest. A little bit more about Feng Shui and Maul Sup. Maul Sup is again village groups. Ancient Korean forestry was based on the concept of Feng Shui, which governed socio-economic activities and landscape management. In previous slides, I showed arrangement of land use type, and the meaning is not necessary on ecosystem arrangement. Even it has important socio-economic meanings together. According to Feng Shui, the optimal location for afforestation depended on the location of human settlements. So people afforested bare entrance and backyard. So traditionally, people planted trees in front of the village. Village gate entrance is important in terms of the movement of winds and other resources. And also the backyard was considered to be very important to keep those winds and other resources within the village. So people afforested entrance and backyard. In ancient Korea, villagers created Maul Sup based on the Feng Shui concept, and the Maul Sup were considered even religious and spiritual areas. So sometimes it included shrines, and local villagers utilized Maul Sup for livelihood, such as dead organic matter, fodder, and timber. Basically, in old days, people in the settlements took well care of trees near the village. This figure shows the basic form of landscape managed with the Feng Shui concept again. So this is the residential area. At the back, you have mountains and forest. And then you have some water resources, including small ponds, and use the water from these ponds for rice paddy. And after the rice paddy, if there is another forested area, you will see the out paddy field again. So arrangement is mountain forest, village, and water resources, paddy field, something like that. So these are the basic forms of landscape management under the concept of feng shui. Anyhow, in old days, Korean people considered trees in front of the village or in the back yard were very important. Still, we have maul soup left throughout the country, even though the number of mauls left decreasing sharply. Still, we see remnants of old maul soup. This figure shows the one maul soup which was used for fodder. Sometimes people let livestock for grazing in these forests also. There was a special type of maul soup we called bibo forest. Bibo means help and improvement. Bibo soups were applied to control village microclimate and prevent natural disaster. I mean, near the village, we created special maul soup, village groups called Bibo soup to prevent natural disasters, something like flooding or strong wind. They shelter the village from strong winds and sudden flooding. So they have good values in terms of securing safe environment for villages. Bibo soups provided shade used as places for relaxation and communications, and also acted as corridors for water and nutrient cycling. I'm pretty sure in your country, you might have a similar type of forest near the village. This is one type of bibo soup near the rice paddy. So we created a line forest to prevent strong wind to protect the rice production. And also near the river or near the sea, we created a forest to prevent the strong wind from the river or sea, and also to prevent sudden flooding. These are the bibo soup, bibo forest, a special type of maul soup. Then how we manage the forest throughout the long history in South Korea. That's the second issue, historical governance of forest resources. Korea has a long history of forestry, and early record of planting have been found. So in year of about 300, so more than 1,700 years ago, we planted trees. Even early 200s, so more than 1,800 years, we found record of a pine tree planting. And other trees like lacquer trees, mulberry, paper mulberry, and the bamboos were recommended for planting in late 800s. So long history of plantation. Moreover, all the laws and policies include the concept of right tree on right side. The meaning of the concept is that tree species for planting should be selected after considering environmental conditions of the target area. Species selection is very important, but we thought the environmental condition is the main priority to decide which tree specifically we will plant at a specific, at a target area. So the meaning of the right tree on right site is we consider environmental condition first rather than uses or benefit of a specific tree. All the days in Korea in 1400s, so in other words, 600 years ago, forced to select tree species depending on local environmental conditions. In other words, there was a kind of a law to enforce, to choose specific trees at a specific location. These are the record of forest governance by ancient Korean kingdoms. So you see the dates, 3rd century, 8th century, something like that, and forest management policies and practices. As I mentioned, more than 1,800 years ago, we planted pine. Pinus densiflora is the major pine tree species in Korea, especially near royal tombs and palaces. And then you see different tree species were recommended for plantation. And later, even they have a law to prevent illegal logging and fire setting. And also they have a law to support the local offices to selecting plantation species based on local environmental condition. And later enhanced community forestry groups and promoting pruning for pine plantation, something like that. So what I'm saying is we have quite old and rich forest management policies and practices through our history. We had many kingdoms, but all kingdoms protected Korean red pine mainly. So they set forbidden forest. They also enforce illegal logging, and they monitor the forest and control the pine caterpillars and so on. And kingdoms promoted cooperation with the local villagers. So not the kingdom forced the people to follow the law. Kingdoms promoted cooperation with the local villagers. They encouraged the local people to manage local forest and also allow them to collect some timber and fuels after managing those forests. And also kingdoms encouraged local people to participate groups for forest management. In general, central government owned the forest in old days and regulated the way of managing forest in East Asia. And selective and low-impact harvesting practices were applied in forest. And some forests, such as Bongsan, were strictly protected, and all private harvesting activities were prohibited. So in old days, we put special order on the rock, not to disturb pine forest, prohibit harvest of pine trees in the mountain. So these are the old record indicating prohibition of Korean red pine logging. And traditionally, this is one picture of the royal tomb. Still, we have many royal tombs throughout the country. And traditionally, we protected, traditionally, we protected the Korean red pine surrounding a royal tomb. If you see, sorry, these trees around royal tombs, these old trees are Korean red pine, one of the main and native and important tree species in Korea. Even nowadays, we still see very old Korean red pine trees throughout the country. And then community forestry was very important in old days, and the tradition continues to modern days, even though the name has been changed a little bit. So in old days, community forestry, we called Sallimgye. So communities near forest played an important role in realizing sustainable forest management. You know, community forestry refers to processes and mechanisms that enable key direct stakeholders in forestry to be part of decision-making in all aspects of forest management. So community forestry regime encompasses participatory conservation, joint forest management, and sometimes private ownership. I'm pretty sure you might have a similar type of cooperation, like a community forestry in your country. So the name Sallimgye is community forestry. That is a local forestry cooperative for laborers to collect timber and fuels and to prevent illegal monopolies and poaching through participatory activities. And members frequently worked with the government. The government means all the kingdoms. As I mentioned in previous slides, not only kingdoms forest, but they worked with the local villagers to manage forest. Sallimgye set strict self-regulations to protect the local forest, including penalties and ways of forest management and utilization. So they have their own self-regulations to manage forest. Sallimgye had a participatory patrol system for fires and pests for local Korean red pine forest. Again, Korean red pine is a native and major tree species, so local people tried to keep Korean red pine forest using participatory patrol system to protect the forest from fires and pests. then that was kind of duties. However, they get benefits from forest. They were allowed to collect timbers, fuels, compost, and even they allowed to put ancestral tomb in forest while they had duties to protect the forest, investing their labor, their fee, even they did fire patrol and forest watching, something like that. So this is the kind of a balanced mechanism between duties and benefit of Sallimgye community forestry in old days. So key concept of Sallimgye from old tradition have been adopted in reforestation in modern days. The name has been changed as Sallimgye. Sallim means forest, Gye means cooperation. So forest cooperation. Sallimgye acts as a self-governing mutual aid associations promoting cooperation between local villagers and forest owners. In this case, forest owners are local and central governments and even sometimes private owners. Members participated in site preparation, tree planting, seed collection, nursery operation, forest management, and area patrols. And as a benefit, economic benefit and technical supports were given to Sallimgye during the reforestation period. Everybody follow me? Any problem to understand? Is it okay to continue? Is everybody sleeping? No? All right, good. You follow. All right. Anyhow, participations of both government and local residents were conceptually similar to the traditional ways of managing forest, such as local residents' use of village forest. So main concept is almost the same. In old days, Sallimgye, and in modern days, Sallimgye. So they worked, local villagers worked with kingdoms in old days, worked with local or central government in modern days to protect forest, and then they get benefits, such as collecting fuels and woods from the forest, which they protect and managed. Okay, so that's the key concept. There are self-regulations by Sallimgye for pine forest conservation. Foreigners found a very interesting self-regulation of local villagers named under Sallimgye. So he listed details about self-regulations. It is very interesting to read these self-regulation. So if you see the second one, anyone who cut down a large tree, not of the pine variety, shall be given 30 blows and fine 100 nyang. Nyang means unit of currency, so quite a lot of money. So if you cut a large trees, shall be given 30 blows and had a fine of large amount of money, something like that. These are the self-regulating rules by local villagers. Now we move to the modern reforestation program in South Korea. Some of you might know the modern reforestation program in South Korea. I'd like to share our successful history of reforestation. Despite the effort of ancient Korean kingdoms, forests in the Korean peninsula decreased sharply because of poaching, private forest monopoly, and natural disaster. But the more importantly, subsequent Japanese colonization for 45 years from 1910 to 1945, and the Korean War, between Korea and Ethiopia. We have a long history of cooperation, even during the Korean War. And we had 3 years of Korean War from 1950 to 53. During these events in 20th century, we lost a lot of forest. Almost we lost all forest throughout the country. So right after the Korean War, the South Korean government launched a nationwide reforestation program since 1960s, which is still one of the most successful reforestation activities in the world. The program was very successful, and the success of this program was considered to be the result of several drivers, including the rapid growth of Korean economy, and the strong leadership of the Korean government, and substitution of energy resources. However, nonetheless, several practices for this program originated from traditional ecological knowledge and practices inherited from ancient Korean society. So we put really high value on traditional knowledge about forest protection, forest management. Already I mentioned in previous slides, and community forest. That's the key component. Close collaboration between local villagers and kingdoms or government in modern days. So again, participatory reforestation and local forestry cooperative would be the key successful driver of our reforestation program. The South Korean government encouraged public participation in reforestation, similar to historical governance during Joseon Dynasty. Joseon Dynasty is one of the older kingdoms. The South Korean government especially attempted to gather voluntary crews for reforestation activities to overcome labor shortages. These government efforts imposed responsibility for the reforestation activity on people across all social areas, including schools, institutions, even militaries and workplaces. I still remember I planted trees when I was elementary school students, and I took care of trees which I planted during my elementary school days. I lived in Seoul, but even in Seoul, we had bare mountains near villages, near towns, and we were encouraged to plant trees near our school, and then encouraged to water trees we planted and took care of trees we planted, even for elementary school students. So these are some photos for participatory reforestation activities during the forest restoration program. So peoples were encouraged to plant trees near their villages. One notable strategy of the South Korean government was the establishment of a Sallimgye, again, forest cooperative. This cooperative was responsible for reforestation, forest management and patrol, and forest harvesting. Members of Sallimgye secured foods and other incentives while also obtaining technical support from the government if they attended to the reforestation activity. So we encouraged people to be involved in the forest establishment and also provided some food and other incentives plus technical support. And Sallimgye markedly contributed to the nation's reforestation program and was a core driver of public participation at the local level. Again, I listed the responsibilities and activities of Sallimgye Forest Cooperative. So they had such as forest patrol, soil protection, reforestation, forest management responsibility, and they had specific activities listed here. And another key successful driver was tree species selection. And the government specified the tree species for the reforestation program on the basis of a climatic zone and site classes of the target area. Previous slides showed right trees on right side. The concept is still same. And site class indicated the potential level of productivity. In other words, the governmental institute classified all area depending on their potential productivity, low class, medium class, high class, something like that, based on topography and soil properties. So a site with a low site class, in other words, low potential productivity area, were revegetated using economically fast-growing species, whereas site with a high site class were economically valuable. It's reversed. I'm sorry. It's reversed. So low site class, we planted nitrogen fixing species or stress tolerant species to improve soil fertility first. And for the high site classes, we planted trees using economically valuable species. So these are the examples of site class and tree species depending on climatic zone, cool temperate region, cool temperate southern region, warm temperate region, so on. So we carefully classify the sites based on site productivity and climate and suggested target species. And during the reforestation period, we also improved forest management techniques using traditionally protected forest. Traditional ecological knowledge and practices indirectly contributed to adjusting modern techniques in reforestation program. So one remarkable example is Gwangnyeong. Gwangnyeong means royal tomb. So in one specific area, we had a royal tomb, and the forest near the royal tomb have been protected strongly for several hundred years. During the period of reforestation, the South Korean government used this Gwangneung experimental forest in piloting modern forestry techniques. The topic of pilot studies covered the seedling production, tree planting, forest management, and mechanization of forest practices, so on. So we tried to improve forest management techniques using well-protected forest. So these are the photos showing monitoring sites and experimental facilities in Gwangneung experimental area. The bottom left photo shows my own experimental area in Gwangneung, which simulate climate change and see the responses of seedlings. So artificially warm the seedlings and artificially control precipitation and see the responses after the treatment. So these are some major research projects conducted in the well-protected Gwangneung experimental area. Then what happened after the successful reforestation program? First, as you imagine, forest recovery. So mean stand volume per hectare was only 9.6 in 1960, but it increased to 146 in 2015. So 146 cubic meters per hectare is a good number. And unstocked forest decreased sharply from 3 million to less than 0.2 million between 1952 and 2007. In other words, there is no more unstocked forest land in Korea anymore. The reforestation program acted as a base for the rehabilitation of biodiversity. So we see a very sharp increase in the index of biodiversity after reforestation. As you understand, the planted trees also prevented soil erosion and provided organic matter by which forest soils become fertile enough for naturally regenerated vegetation to grow. This is the good change from bare land to fertile soil, which possible for natural regeneration. So this is the gradual change after reforestation. Before reforestation and change after reforestation. So huge changes in forest landscape. And also very sharp increase in biodiversity. You name different animal species, and from 1907 to year of 2000, you see increase in number of individuals of different species. And also carbon stock was very low in 1954 and increased more than twice in 2012 because of reforestation. And restored the forest additionally provided ecosystem services, including disaster risk reduction, water yield enhancement, soil erosion control. These are the benefits for human society. So we calculated ecosystem services in monetary base. So from 1971 to 2010, ecosystem services increased dramatically because of carbon sequestration, disaster risk reduction, soil erosion control, so on. So this figure shows how much carbon stored after reforestation. You see a very sharp increase in carbon sequestration after 1970s. Okay. If we convert those carbon sequestration, water yield enhancement, soil erosion control, disaster risk into monetary value, these are increasing very sharply. You see, the bottom line is the cost for reforestation. In the beginning, the cost was more than the benefit, but after a few years, the benefits are much higher than the cost, as you see here. Okay, quite interesting. And experimental forest established on the reforested lands. As I said, we established a good experimental forest and utilized them to improve our forest management techniques. So still, this is ongoing project. I introduced a small case study in one island, Jeju Island. Even though it's a small island, they had a successful experimental forest system and very useful. They produced very useful forest techniques from the experimental forest. So short conclusions. Experience regarding sustainable forest management, traditional and modern forestry, modern community forestry, success of natural reforestation, integration of reforestation activity with economic developments, and ongoing research and developments. I briefly mentioned these topics. But again, I like to emphasize the value of community forestry. In old days, its name was Sallimgye, and in modern days, Sallimgye. Those belong to countries' forest policies concerning forest restoration, protection, and utilization. I think many developing countries have their own traditional knowledge and experiences, and pretty sure revisiting it would be very useful as a cross-border strategies during toward the sustainable forest management. So for reforestation and sustainable forest management, we had a top-down governance, like government incentives and regulation, but we had a bottom-up motivation using traditional knowledge and practices. And also we had strong leadership and authority and technical support by research and development. So these combined drivers resulted in successful reforestation in South Korea. Okay, that's all I have today. I think we have 5 minutes left. Do you have any comments or questions toward my presentation?
Thank you very much, Professor Son. So here we have several questions. Can you see that in chatting?
I'm sorry now. Oops.
Can I, one question is, how do we merge and come together to have a profitable and successful forest management plan, management platform?
Would you say that again? How?
How do we merge and come together to have a profitable and successful forest management platform? How do we merge them?
You mean with the local people or different components?
with the traditional and the modern way of forest management, he didn't mention here, but
Mhm.
traditional and modern way of forest management, how do we merge? How do
Aha.
we put
Uh,
together?
I tried to mention that we had valuable traditional knowledge on forest management, uh, like right trees on right sites. And then in modern days, we developed a more skillful way to conduct right trees on right site concept. Even though the concept is very old and tradition, we have modernized those old concepts and traditions into modern scientific idea and scientific technology. So during reforestation period, we carefully classify the land into different potential productivity area based on soil and climate. In other words, the concept is the same. We should plant right trees on right place. But in modern days, we had more skillful technique to decide a specific site for uh, potential productivity using soil analysis data or climatic data, so on. So that's the main message that I was trying to say. For example, even we had a community forest from old days, and they had self-regulating rules, so on. And then the concept was still valid in modern days, but they had more practical ways for forest management, and government provided technical support and gave them incentives when they were involved in forest management activities, so on. So more modernized way to manage forest efficiently and economically. Is that okay? Is
Yeah,
it
I
clear
think
now?
so.
Clear?
And yeah, and there are other questions,
Uh-huh.
needs, trained person, funds, and cooperation, and you mentioned, and also here the student said the right tree in right place, and then you mentioned about that also. And any other questions for the Professor Son? Here is a good one.
Uh-huh.
In our country, the
Uh-huh.
economic value of a forest is not accounted
Uh-huh.
correctly.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So how do we, include in national accounting system?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a good question. I think every year, Korea Forest Service announced statistics on forest. So forest area, forest stocking volume, age of forest, ownership, so on. And also, they announced the value of forest production in terms of timber, fuel wood, and other byproducts also. In addition, the Korean government officially announced uh, public benefit from forest uh, based on erosion control, water resources enhancement, carbon sequestration, so on. It's a good study and very reliable study, and the final numbers are really huge in the aspect of GDP. I know still the forest valuation is not included in the national GDP system itself, but KFS announced announced the monetary value of public benefit from forest to show how important forests are in this country. Am I right, Dr. Park?
Yes, you're correct. Good answer.
Yeah.
So, and any other questions?
Oops,
Can you
about
raise
time
your
to
hand?
finish?
Yeah, or just wait. We will see there. Or we have any other students who have some questions? Professor Jebene or anyone else has any questions about Professor Son?
No more
Okay.
questions.
Okay, if not, but still, we have his email address is available. So
Yes.
if you have any questions about the feng shui or traditional forestry maulsu, and also community forestry and deforestation program and impact of reforestation program, and then you can send him the email and ask him, or so you can contact him later. So you can ask him, you can get some information from him, and he
Yes.
will answer all these your questions and interest.
Surely, I will do. Surely, I think in brochure or proceedings, you may find my email address. I will be happy to answer if you have any questions or comments on my presentation. Again, it was my great honor to talk today, and hope the successful training workshop for participants. I appreciate Professor So-Young Chung for giving me this chance, and appreciate his efforts for these activities. And also I appreciate Dr. Park's efforts and all kind of work for the collaboration. Thank you. I'm leaving.